first punch landed before Tunde could even see who threw it. He was running, barefoot, lungs burning, heart hammering so hard it felt like it might punch through his ribs down a narrow alley off Akinhami Street in Surulere. Behind him, glass crunched under frantic feet, and someone shouted, "Don't let him escape!" The night air smelled like dust, fried akara and fear. Tunde turned a sharp corner, nearly colliding with a stack of empty crates. He stumbled, caught himself on a wooden door frame, and kept going. His bag, heavy with stolen electronics, slammed against his back as every stride. "Razor!" he hissed over his shoulder, searching for his friend, his leader, the man who had promised him a way out. "Razor, where you dey?" No answer. Just more shouting, more footsteps. Tunde burst out onto a busier road and almost ran into a dunfo that had braked hard to avoid a pothole the size of a small bathtub. The conductor leaned out, furious. "Are you mad? You won't die tonight." Tunde didn't answer. He swerved around the bus, dodged a woman carrying a tray of oranges on her head, and sprinted toward the market stalls that lined the street. Most of them were closed, their metal shutters pulled down and padlocked, but a few stubborn traders were still packing up, grumbling about the noise and the late hour. "Thief!" someone screamed from behind him. The word hit him like a second punch, harder than the first. Tunde's legs moved faster, but his mind lagged behind, still trying to process how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. How did it come to this? 6 months ago, he was the boy who helped Mama Chidi carry her water buckets from the communal tap. 6 months ago, he was the boy who made jokes with the Okada riders and played football with the little children until their mothers called them home for dinner. Now he was running like a hunted animal through the streets of Lagos. He glanced back and saw a small crowd forming already, people drawn by the alarm, by the shouting, by the oldest human instinct to chase what runs. The crowd was growing, feeding on itself, multiplying with every second. Tunde ducked into another alley, his bare foot landing on something sharp. Pain shot through his heel, but he bit back a cry and kept going. The bag slipped from his shoulder. He grabbed it tighter, yanking it back up. He couldn't afford to lose it, not after everything. Not after what he'd done. Not after what he'd become. 3 months earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon that felt like any other, Tunde had been standing in line at the Ajegunle Primary Health Centre, holding his mother's worn clinic card in one hand and counting out coins in the other. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered constantly, and the waiting room smelled of antiseptic and too many bodies in too small a space. The nurse, a tired-looking woman in her 40s with kind eyes that had seen too much suffering, looked at him with the kind of pity he hated more than anything. "Your mother needs to see the specialist," she said, her voice low and gentle. "And the medicine, the proper one, not this one we've been giving her. It's not cheap. This one here is just to manage the symptoms." Tunde felt his stomach drop. "How much?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would be more than he had. The nurse told him the amount. Tunde stared at her for a long moment, sure he had misheard. When she repeated it, his hands went cold. He had been working at the construction site all week, hauling cement blocks under the merciless Lagos sun from dawn till dusk, and he still didn't have half of it, not even close. Is there something cheaper?" he asked quietly. The nurse shook her head. "I'm sorry. For her condition, this is what she needs. The cough is getting worse, and if it's not treated properly—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Outside the clinic, Tunde sat on a low concrete wall and stared at the money in his palm. Crumpled Naira notes and a few coins. It wasn't enough for food for the rest of the week, let alone medicine. His mother had been coughing all night again, the sound wet and frightening, like something was breaking loose inside her chest. She tried to hide it when he came into the room, turning her face to the wall and pretending to sleep, but he always heard. He always knew. "Tunde!" a voice called from across the street. He looked up and saw Reza leaning against a parked motorcycle, wearing clean jeans and a fresh polo shirt that probably cost more than Tunde made in a month. Reza always looked like money, even back when everyone knew he didn't have any. That was his gift, making people believe in the image he projected. "How your mama?" Reza asked, crossing the street with easy confidence. Tunde shrugged, because if he spoke he might cry, and crying in public was something he hadn't done since his father's funeral 2 years ago. Reza came closer, studying his face. "You still dey suffer like this, after all your hard work?" He shook his head slowly. "That's not right, guy." "It's honest work," Tunde said automatically, the phrase his mother had taught him since he was old enough to understand what work meant. Reza laughed, but not mockingly. It was almost sad. "Honest work that can't buy medicine? Honest work that makes your mother cough herself to sleep every night? Honest work that leaves you counting coins like a beggar?" He shook his head again. "Listen, my guy, I know you. I've known you since we were small boys playing in the gutter. You're smart, you're likable, people trust you. I see how they greet you in the market, how the old women smile at you, how the children follow you around. That's valuable. That trust is worth something." Tunde looked away. He knew where this conversation usually went. Reza had been hinting at it for months, ever since he'd started showing up with nice clothes and a new phone. "I have a small thing coming up," Reza continued, his voice casual, like he was talking about a football match. "One job, easy. You just stand and watch, make sure nobody surprises us. After that, you go collect enough money to handle your mama's bills for months, maybe even see that specialist." Tunde hesitated, his fingers tightening around the coins. "I don't want trouble, Reza." "Who wants trouble?" Reza spread his hands innocently. "Trouble finds people who have nothing to lose, but you have your mother to lose. So let me help you protect her. That's what friends do." That was the thing about Reza that made him dangerous. He never threatened, he never forced, he never talked about crime or stealing or breaking the law. He just made everything sound like love, like family, like the only reasonable choice a good son could make. Tunde looked down at the coins in his hand, then back at the clinic where his mother would need to return next week. He took the job. The first time was easy, just like Reza said it would be. Tunde stood at the corner of a quiet street near Mushin, while Reza and 2 others, Kenny and a guy they called Small B, went into a warehouse that stored electronics. Tunde's job was simple. Whistle twice if he saw police. That was it. He didn't have to touch anything. He didn't even see what they took. He just stood there for 20 minutes, trying to look casual, his heart beating so fast he thought people passing by might hear it. When it was over, Reza handed him a brown envelope. "See," Reza said, clapping him on the shoulder. "No blood, no stress, just watching." Tunde counted the money later that night, alone in his room with the door locked and his hands shaking. It was more than he'd earned in 2 months of carrying cement blocks, of mixing concrete until his back screamed, of climbing rickety scaffolding that swayed in the wind. He paid for his mother's medicine the next morning, walking to the pharmacy before she woke up. When she saw the new bottle on the table beside her sleeping mat, she looked at him with sharp, suspicious eyes. His mother had always been able to read him like a book. "Where you get this money from?" she asked, her voice rough from coughing. "Overtime," Tunde said quickly, the lie coming easier than he expected. "At the site, they needed extra hands for a big job." His mother frowned, picking up the bottle and examining it. "They don't pay like this for overtime. I know how construction work pays." Tunde forced a smile, the same easy smile that had always worked on her before. "Mama, just take your medicine. You're thinking too much." She took it, measuring out the dose carefully, but her eyes stayed on him for a long time after. She didn't say anything more, but Tunde felt the weight of her silence for the rest of the day. After that, the jobs came more often, once a week, then twice. Lookout, runner, messenger, small things, Reza always said, nothing serious. Tunde told himself he was still a good person. He still helped old women cross the busy roads. He still made the little children in his compound laugh by doing silly impressions of the local politicians they saw on TV. He still greeted everyone in the market with respect, asking about their families, remembering their names. Pastor, the gang boys started calling him, because he was too gentle for their world, too kind, too much like the person he used to be. "Pastor, go preach for us today," one of them joked after a job, and everyone laughed, including Tunde. Even Reza laughed, but then he put his arm around Tunde's shoulders. "Leave him. Na him good heart they cover us sometimes. Police see him, they no go suspect. Who go believe say pastor fit thief?" Tunde laughed too, because laughing was easier than thinking about what he was becoming, easier than looking at himself in the cracked mirror in his room and wondering when the change had happened, when the line had been crossed. The money helped. That was what he told himself. His mother's cough got better. They paid 3 months of rent in advance, and their landlord stopped knocking on their door with threats. Tunde bought new shoes, not expensive ones, just functional ones that didn't have holes. He bought rice and beans and chicken, real chicken, not the tiny pieces they usually got. His mother cried when she saw the food, and Tunde told himself her tears were worth it. But one evening in late October, Reza came to him with a different look in his eyes, more serious, more urgent. They met at their usual spot, a small beer parlour near the market, where the owner didn't ask questions and the music was always too loud for serious conversations to be overheard. "This one is bigger," Reza said, leaning across the table. "High-end phone shop in Surulere. iPhones, laptops, watches, the whole thing. We have an inside man. Security guard go leave the back door open after closing time." Tunde felt his stomach tighten. "That's not like the other ones." Reza nodded slowly. "I know, but the money is serious, real serious." He paused, watching Tunde's face. "And your mother might need surgery soon, you know. I hear things." Tunde's throat tightened. "Who told you that?" "People talk," Reza said with a shrug. "I was at the clinic last week, different matter, and I heard the nurses talking about a woman with a bad cough. They mentioned your compound. I'm just saying, you don't want to be caught unprepared. Surgery costs are not small." Tunde thought about his mother's cough, which had been getting worse again despite the medicine. He thought about the doctor's face during the last visit, the way he'd frowned while listening to her chest. He thought about the neighbors who had started whispering that the family was struggling too much, that maybe they should move back to the village where life was cheaper.
"How long?" Tunde asked quietly. "15 minutes, Razor said. "In and out. The guard opens the door at exactly 10 p.m. We go in, we take what we need, we leave. Clean, simple." Tunde looked down at his hands. They were calloused from hard work, scarred from concrete and metal and wood. But lately they felt dirty in a way soap couldn't fix, in a way no amount of scrubbing could make clean. He thought about saying no. He thought about walking away, finding another job, working harder, praying harder, hoping that somehow things would get better. But then he remembered the number the nurse had mentioned for the surgery. He remembered his mother's face when she tried to hide her coughing. He remembered being a child and watching his father work himself to death trying to provide for them, and how in the end it hadn't been enough. "Okay," he said finally, the word coming out like a surrender. The night of the job arrived too quickly. Tunde wore a dark hoodie and carried a small backpack that felt impossibly light considering what he was about to fill it with. Razor picked him up at the agreed location, a junction 3 streets away from his compound, so his mother wouldn't see, in a Honda with tinted windows. Kenny was already in the back seat, nodding to music from his earphones. Small B sat in front, checking his phone. "You ready, Pastor?" Kenny asked, pulling out one earphone and grinning. Tunde tried to smile back. "Let's just do it and go home." Small B laughed, a sound with no real humor in it. "See him face, like say him dey go church, not go steal." "It's not stealing," Razor said calmly, starting the engine. "It's redistribution. These shop owners get insurance. They'll collect their money back. But you, your mama, nobody dey insure ona."
The car ride was tense, despite Razor's attempts at conversation. Nobody said much. Kenny went back to his music. Small B kept checking his phone. Tunde stared out the window at Lagos passing by, streetlights casting orange pools on broken roads, hawkers packing up their goods for the night, couples arguing outside beer parlours, children still awake despite the hour, playing in the compounds. Normal life happening all around while they drove towards something criminal, something wrong, something that would change everything. When they reached the shop, the street was quieter than Tunde expected. A few cars parked along the road, a generator humming somewhere, a dog barking in the distance. "The inside man?" Tunde asked, looking around. Razor checked his phone, frowning. He should be here, should have sent the signal by now. They waited 5 minutes, parked 2 buildings down. 10 minutes. Razor's frown deepened. "No signal from him," Kenny muttered, pulling out his earphones completely now, alert. Razor cursed under his breath, a string of Yoruba words that Tunde's mother would have slapped him for using. "So what we dey do?" Small B asked. Razor was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he turned to look at all of them. "We still doing it." Tunde's stomach turned. "Without the inside man? We already here. We can't waste the opportunity. We've been planning this for 2 weeks. "But the alarm," Tunde started. "We go fast, in and out, 3 minutes maximum. Grab what we can carry and go."
Tunde wanted to say no, wanted to tell Razor this was crazy, that they should leave, that they should try another time. But then he thought of his mother lying awake at night, coughing into her pillow so she wouldn't disturb him, and the words died in his throat. He followed them out of the car. They moved quickly and quietly to the back of the shop. Razor had a small crowbar hidden under his jacket. The alley behind the shop was dark, lit only by a single weak bulb from a neighbouring building. Razor worked on the lock lid, metal scraping against metal. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night.
Tunde's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his throat. Almost, Reza nuttered. The lock gave way with a crack that echoed off the walls. And then the alarms exploded into the night. The sound was deafening, a wailing siren that seemed to shake the very air. Lights inside the shop flashed on automatically, bright and accusing. "Shit!" Kenny hissed, jumping back. "Move! Move now!" Reza shouted, abandoning any pretense of stealth. They rushed inside, and Tunde's eyes adjusted quickly to the harsh fluorescent light. Glass display cases lined the walls, filled with phones, tablets, smartwatches, and jewelry. It looked like a treasure chest, like something from a movie, all that expensive technology just sitting there behind thin glass. Reza grabbed whatever he could reach, using the crowbar to smash open a case. The sound of breaking glass mixed with the alarm. Kenny stuffed devices into his bag with frantic movements. Small B was already at another case, sweeping phones into his backpack. Tunde stood frozen for half a second, his mind screaming at him to run, to get out, to leave while he still could.
"Pastor," Reza barked, using the name like a command. "Now! No time!" Tunde moved. His hands grabbed a laptop from an open case and shoved it into his backpack. Then a phone, then another. His hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped a tablet that probably cost more than his mother made in 6 months of selling vegetables in the market. "This is not me," he kept thinking, even as his hands kept moving. "This is not who I am. This is not what Mama raised." But the alarms kept screaming, and time kept moving, and his mother's face kept appearing in his mind, her disappointment, her shame, but also her cough, her pain, her need. "We need go," Kenny shouted. "Alarm done wake everybody." They ran for the back exit, but when Reza pushed on the security gate, it didn't move. "What?" Reza shoved harder. The gate had locked automatically when the alarm triggered. They were trapped. "Front door!" Reza yelled, and they turned and ran back through the shop. Tunde's bag was heavy now, pulling at his shoulder. He could hear the electronics shifting and sliding inside. Each one was evidence. Each one was proof of what he'd become. They burst through the front door, and that was when Tunde saw that the street wasn't empty anymore. A security guard from the building next door was standing there in his uniform, phone already pressed to his ear, eyes wide. A taxi driver had stopped his car and was getting out, trying to see what was happening. A man selling suya, one of the late-night vendors who stayed out to catch the last customers, was standing beside his grill, pointing at them with one hand while the other reached for his phone. "Olé! Olé! Thief!" he screamed, his voice cutting through even the alarm. Reza didn't hesitate. He shoved past the security guard. The man stumbled backward, his phone clattering to the ground, and disappeared into the darkness between 2 buildings, his bag bouncing against his back. Kenny followed fast and low, ducking under the taxi driver's reaching hands. Small B ran the other way, towards a gap between parked cars. Tunde ran too, but his legs felt heavy, like they were moving through water. He turned left instead of right, into a street that looked less dangerous, less crowded. "Stop him!" someone shouted behind him. "Don't let the small one escape!" Tunde glanced back and saw people starting to move, not just 1 or 2, 5, then 10, then more, a small crowd forming from nowhere, drawn by the noise and the chase and the word that spread like fire in dry grass. "Olé! Thief!" He ran harder, his bare feet slapping against the pavement. He'd lost his slippers somewhere, maybe in the shop, maybe in those first frantic seconds of running. The road was rough under his feet, full of small stones and broken glass and all the debris that accumulated on Lagos streets.
He turned down an alley, his right foot hitting a piece of broken bottle. Pain shot up his leg, sharp and immediate, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. The bag bounced against his back. He could hear the electronics shifting and sliding inside, each expensive device that represented his choices, his crimes, his fall. "Tunde!" a voice called from somewhere behind him. His blood ran cold. Someone knew his name. Someone had recognized him even in the darkness, even running. Maybe one of the vendors who saw him in the market, maybe a neighbor from a nearby compound. It didn't matter. What mattered was that he wasn't anonymous anymore. His crime had a face now, a name, an identity that would follow him. He burst onto Akinhami Street, breathing hard, and saw more people ahead, a group of young men standing near a closed kiosk, passing around a bottle, a woman with a baby strapped to her back, walking home late from somewhere, an Okada rider sitting on his motorcycle, waiting for a passenger who might pay double for the late hour.
Tunde tried to slow down, to look normal, to blend in, but his breathing gave him away, ragged gasps that sounded like guilt, and the bag on his shoulder bulging with stolen goods, and the way his eyes kept darting back to check if he was still being chased. One of the young men looked at him, then at the people running behind him in the distance, then back to Tunde. Understanding dawned on his face. "Ole!" the young man shouted, his voice carrying across the street. "Thief, they're here!" That was all it took. The group ahead turned toward him like a wave. The woman with the baby stepped back, clutching her child tighter. The Okada rider stood up from his bike. Tunde changed direction again, but it was too late. A hand grabbed his hoodie from behind and yanked him backward. He stumbled, his injured foot giving way, and fell hard onto the pavement. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. The bag flew from his shoulder, spinning through the air and landing several feet away. The zipper burst open, and stolen phones and the laptop spilled across the ground like evidence at a crime scene. "Thief!" someone screamed, and the word was picked up and repeated, growing louder each time. "Ole! We catch 'em! Thief!" More hands grabbed him before he could get up. Someone kicked him in the ribs. Tunde curled up instinctively, trying to protect his head, his hands coming up to cover his face. "Please," he gasped, tasting blood in his mouth, though he didn't know when he'd bitten his tongue. "Please, I'm sorry." "Sorry for what?" a man's voice shouted above him. "You think sorry will bring back what you stole? You think sorry got change anything?" Another kick, harder this time. This one caught his shoulder, sending new pain radiating down his arm. Tunde tried to get up, tried to crawl away, but someone stepped on his back, pressing him down into the rough concrete. The stolen phones around him glittered under the streetlights like broken promises, like shattered dreams, like every wrong choice he'd ever made. The crowd grew quickly, the way crowds always do in Lagos. People came from every direction, shop owners who'd heard the commotion, passers-by who couldn't resist the pull of public drama, neighbors who'd been woken by the alarm and the shouting. Within minutes, there were 30, then 40, then 50, maybe more. Their faces blurred together in Tunde's pain-filled vision, becoming a single entity of anger and judgment. "Bring rope!" someone yelled from the back of the crowd. "Where is the tire?" another voice called, and several people laughed, not with humor, but with the dark satisfaction of righteous anger. Tunde's blood turned to ice in his veins. He knew that word. Everyone in Lagos knew it. Everyone in Nigeria knew what it meant. Tire, the euphemism for the most brutal form of street justice. Necklacing, they called it in some places. A tire around the victim's neck and shoulders, soaked in petrol, set on fire. A punishment older than the law, crueler than any courtroom, final in a way that left no room for redemption. "No," Tunde whispered, the word barely audible through his split lip. "Please, no, please." A woman pushed through the crowd and spat at him. The saliva hit his cheek, warm and degrading. "You people are the reason this country is like this, stealing everything, making honest people suffer while you take shortcuts." "I didn't mean," Tunde tried to say, but someone punched him in the mouth before he could finish. His lips split further. Blood filled his mouth, copper-tasting and thick. "Look at him," another man said, kneeling down to get a better look at Tunde's face. "Small boy, but he's already a criminal. This is how they start. Small phone stealing today, armed robbery tomorrow."
Tunde's mind flashed to his mother. She would be asleep now in their small room, maybe coughing softly into the night. When she woke up tomorrow and heard what had happened, and she would hear because news travelled faster than light in their community, her heart would break. It would break in a way that no medicine could fix. Mama Chidi would tell everyone how disappointed she was, how she'd always said there was something good in that boy. The neighbours would shake their heads with that particular satisfaction people get from seeing their suspicions confirmed. The children who used to follow him around would be told to stay away from boys like that. And his mother would know that all her sacrifices, all her hard work, all her prayers had somehow not been enough to save him from himself. "I'm sorry," Tunde sobbed, not really talking to the crowd anymore. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry." Someone grabbed his hair and pulled his head up roughly, forcing him to look at the crowd. "Who is your Mama? She raise a thief? Where she dey? Make we go call her to come see what her pickandon become." The thought of his mother being dragged here, seeing him like this, was worse than any beating. "Please," Tunde begged, tears mixing with the blood on his face. "I'll return everything, I swear to God. I'll never do it again. Just let me go. Please, I'll change." "Return?" The man holding his hair laughed bitterly. "After you already stole? After you already spoiled the shop? You think say not to return 'em? What of the trauma for the shop owner? What of the damage?" More blows rained down. Tunde felt something crack in his side, a rib maybe, or something worse. He couldn't breathe properly. Each breath felt like knives in his chest. The world started to spin, colors bleeding into each other. Through the chaos of pain and noise, he heard Razor's name mentioned. "Was he with Razor's boys?" someone in the crowd asked. "Yes, I swear, I saw them running together, this small one and two other boys. Razor they lead 'em." Tunde's heart sank even further, though he hadn't thought it possible. Even if he somehow survived this night, Razor would know he'd been caught. The gang didn't forgive weakness, they didn't forgive failure, and they especially didn't forgive people who might talk to the police, who might give names when the pain got too bad. He was trapped on all sides, by the crowd that wanted to kill him, by the gang that would see him a liability, by his own choices that had led him here. A loud voice cut through the noise, authoritative and angry. "Bring the tire. Where is the tire? Let's teach him a lesson he'll never forget. Let's show all these thieves what happens." The crowd's energy shifted, became more focused, more purposeful. This wasn't just random violence anymore. It was becoming an execution. Tunde tried to crawl away, his hands scraping against the rough pavement. His knee wasn't working right. Someone must have kicked it while he was down. He dragged himself forward with his hands, ignoring the pain as the concrete scraped his palms raw. The stolen phones that had spilled from his bag cut into his skin, but he barely felt it compared to everything else. He managed to move maybe 3 feet before someone stepped in front of him. The man was holding an old car tire, the rubber cracked and worn from too many miles. He dropped it beside Tunde with a heavy thud that sounded like a judge's gavel. "No," Tunde gasped, looking up at the man with swollen eyes that could barely see anymore. "I have a mother. She's sick. Please." But the man's face was hard, unmoved. "And the people you thief from, they no get mother? They no get family? You think say only you get problem?" People were shouting now, their voices blending into a roar that sounded almost celebratory. Some looked eager, feeding off the crowd's energy. Some looked uncertain, their faces showing the first signs of doubt. Some looked like they wanted to stop it, but were too afraid to be the only one, too afraid to be seen as sympathizing with a thief. "Wait," a woman's voice said quietly from somewhere in the crowd. "Maybe we should call the police. Let them handle this one."
"The police?" Someone scoffed loudly. "You dey craze. By the time they come, he go done disappear, or they go collect money from his people and release him same night. You know how this thing dey work for this Lagos." The woman didn't respond. The moment for mercy passed. Someone appeared with a jerrycan, the kind people use to buy fuel for generators. The smell of petrol hit the air, sharp and sickening, cutting through even the smell of Tunde's blood and sweat. Tunde looked around desperately, his vision blurred by tears and swelling. Faces, so many faces, old and young, men and women. Some he recognized from the market, some were complete strangers, all of them united in their anger, in their need for immediate justice, in their belief that this was right. He searched for mercy in those faces and found none. Some looked eager, yes, some looked uncertain, but nobody moved to stop it. Nobody was willing to be the one to say enough. Tunde's vision blurred further with tears. He thought of the little children who used to follow him around the compound, begging him to play football or tell them stories. He thought of the old women he'd helped carry their shopping, who'd blessed him and called him a good boy. He thought of his mother's smile when he brought home food, before she started asking questions about where the money came from. How did he become this? The question echoed in his mind, painful and accusing. He remembered the first time Reza offered him money, how it had seemed like a blessing, like an answer to prayers. He remembered telling himself it was just once, just to help his mother, just until things got better. He remembered laughing with the gang boys, feeling like he belonged somewhere for the first time since his father died, feeling important, feeling seen. All of it, every small choice, every compromise, every time he told himself it didn't matter, led to this moment, led to lying on the ground with a tire beside him and petrol in the air, and death coming closer with every second. Someone grabbed his arms and started pulling him toward the tire. The hands were rough, without any gentleness, treating him like an object rather than a person. "No!" Tunde screamed, finding energy from somewhere deep inside. "Please, I'm sorry. I'll change. I swear to God Almighty I'll change. Give me another chance. Please." But the crowd's chanting had started, rhythmic and terrifying. "Burn him, burn him, burn him." It sounded like a prayer in reverse, like a curse being spoken into existence. They forced the tire over his head. Tunde thrashed, but there were too many hands holding him down, on his shoulders, on his legs, on his back. The rough rubber scraped against his skin as they pushed it down to his shoulders. It smelled of dust and old roads and the miles it had travelled before ending up here, ending up as an instrument of death. "Hold him still," a man shouted. "Make we no waste time." Tunde looked up through the tire, his vision now limited to the circle of sky above and the faces of his executioners. He saw them through swollen eyes that could barely open, saw the righteous anger on their faces, the belief that they were doing something necessary, something good. "Please," he whispered one more time, though he knew it was useless. "Mama, I'm sorry, Mama." The man with the jerrycan unscrewed the cap.
The sound seemed impossibly loud, the squeak of metal on metal, the slosh of liquid inside. Tunde's breathing became frantic, panicked. His body heaved, trying to pull in air even though there was plenty. His body knew what his mind was trying not to accept. This was how it ended. 17 years old, lying in a Lagos street, killed by a mob for stealing phones.
He looked at the faces around him one last time, searching desperately for mercy, for compassion, for someone who might see him as more than just a thief. A few people looked away, unable to watch what was about to happen. A few looked horrified, their hands over their mouths, but nobody moved to stop it. Nobody was willing to stand against the crowd. Tunde closed his eyes. He saw his mother's face, not angry, not disappointed, just sad, the way she'd looked when his father died, like something inside her had broken that could never be fixed. He would do that to her again. His choices, his death would break her all over again. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered into the darkness behind his closed eyes. "I'm so sorry. I just wanted to help. I just wanted to make things better." The man with the jerry can took a step towards him. Tunde's whole body tensed, bracing for the liquid, for the fire, for the end. And then he heard it. At first, it was so faint he thought he might be imagining it, a distant sound, barely audible over the crowd's chanting. A wail. The crowd didn't notice right away. They were too caught up in their anger, too focused on the punishment they believed was justice. But the sound grew louder, more distinct. Sirens, police sirens blaring towards them through the Lagos night. Tunde's eyes flew open, hope flaring in his chest despite everything. Someone in the crowd finally heard it. "Police de com," a voice shouted. "Within," another voice asked. "Police, I hear siren." The word spread through the crowd like a reverse fire, dampening rather than igniting. The chanting faltered, stopped. Another voice now panicked. "Scatter, scatter! If police catch us for mob justice, we go follow enter trouble." The hands holding Tunde loosened just slightly as people's attention divided between the punishment they wanted to deliver and the consequences they wanted to avoid. Tunde searched frantically for the source of the sirens. Were they real? Were they coming here? Or were they passing by on the way to some other emergency in this city that never slept? The man with the jerry can paused, looking toward the sound. The sirens were definitely closer. The wailing sound grew louder with each second, echoing off buildings. Several people in the crowd started backing away, their righteous anger suddenly tempered by the possibility of arrest. In Lagos, mob justice was technically illegal, even if it happened all the time. If the police actually showed up, if they actually cared this time, people could be arrested. "Abeg, make we go," someone said. "This thing done pass, be careful." But others were still there, still angry, still wanting their pound of flesh. "We fit finish 'em quick," a man shouted, "before police reach." The man with the jerry can took another step towards Tunde, his hand tightening on the container. Tunde lay there, helpless, the tire still around his shoulders, staring at the jerry can that held his death. The man with the jerry can paused, looking toward the sound. The sirens were getting closer, louder, urgent. But the crowd was still there. The tire was still around him. The petrol was still in the air. He didn't think they'd get here in time. A few people started backing away, but others were still shouting, still angry, still wanting their justice. Tunde lay there, helpless, staring at the flashing lights now visible at the end of the street, red and blue, getting closer. But would it be seconds too late? The man with the jerry can took a step toward him again. Tunde's whole body tensed. And then everything happened at once. If this story gripped you from that desperate first chase to the final heart-stopping moment when everything hung in the balance, don't keep it to yourself. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think happened to Tunde. Did the police arrive in time? Could a boy like him ever find redemption after falling so far? Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that shine an unflinching light on the real struggles happening in our streets, the choices that trap our young people, and the thin line between survival and tragedy. Hit that like button if this story moved you, if it made you think about the Tundes in your own community, the good boys who take wrong paths because they see no other way. Share this video because these stories need to be told, these conversations need to happen, and change begins when we stop looking away from uncomfortable truths.